the son of an industrial genius sees the injustice his father's utopia is creating for the working class and seeks to become the bridge between the two camps. But will he succeed before an inventor's creation sparks open war between them? This is the premise of Fritz Lang's 1927 silent sci-fi classic, Metropolis. And that's the film we'll be reviewing this week on Movie Bones. Welcome to Movie Bones. My name is Justin Miller, and this is my co-host, Ryan Spurlock. Say hello, Ryan.
Hello, hello, hello.
It's a wonderful week, and this week we've got Metropolis, the 1927 German sci-fi film starring Brigitte Helm, Alfred Abel, Gustav Froelich, and Rudolf Klein-Rogge. It centers on the character of Freder Fredersen, the son of a tycoon industrialist and de facto ruler of a futuristic metropolis named Joe. That's J-O-H. He lives a life of idle pleasures, isolated from the grim reality of the workers who slave away to keep the city running down below. That is, until he's confronted by Maria, a Moses-like figure who reveals to Freder the depredations being inflicted on the working class and their families. He sets out to right the wrong and become the mediator between head and hands, a.k.a. capital and labor. His father naturally opposes this and, with the help of the inventor Rotwang, attempts to sow discord among the workers with the aid of a mechanical look-alike of Maria that will deceive them. That's the setup. So, Ryan, what did you think?
Well, it was a movie.
It is a movie. It's a 2.5-hour long version. At least that's the version we got. That's on Tubi right now.
So I'll make this pretty clear real quick. I did not hate the movie or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, not my cup of tea, I would say.
Yeah.
Completely. And I think it probably has to do, I've tried to sit down and watch silent films before. I watched Nosferatu, and it's probably a little bit of my own ability to, pay attention all the time. And if I can't pay attention all the time, that might, I'll have to go back and read things and everything. The version on Tubi is the most up-to-date version. I'll go ahead and say this for anybody that's planning on sitting down and watching it. I'm not saying it's a bad movie or anything like that, but because it is the most up-to-date, I want to say that there are plenty of scenes that you can maybe consider in high definition. That will throw you off a little bit. And I will tell you why that will throw you off a little bit, because you can tell how much makeup they got caked on the main character.
I know what you're talking about. Wait, I'm watching this, and it does look like, if you were to try and remove it, you could probably remove inches worth of caked on stuff.
And then, of course, you have certain scenes that happen quite a bit throughout the movie where, for whatever reason, they weren't able to restore properly. Mm-hmm. So it's very grainy looking. It doesn't really throw you off too much, but it is very grainy looking. And I wonder, because again, we watched the most up-to-date version, but I do wonder, there's this whole swath of the film. Well, I don't know. It's a good 5-10 minutes maybe, where an action sequence is supposed to happen. But instead of you getting the full action sequence, it just says, this is what happens.
Yes.
And that is it's when two characters are in a fight with one another.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand why they had to do that. That's like patching over the lost footage. There's still some of that stuff out there. And it may just be that footage never gets found. It just gets lost to history. I know that some of it was actually found. I read something that after the war, there was some of it was found in Argentina. Not surprisingly, a bunch of Germans fled to Argentina, as we know. Yes,
that makes perfect sense.
That makes perfect sense. Where should we look for this old German footage? Argentina. Yes. So, but yeah, and it doesn't. I mean, I can read through that. It's one particular segment in particular is longer than others. There's a few other places where it's a smaller interruption, but it's overall speaking, I didn't lose anything for having not seen it for me personally. I mean, there's so much there that's in it. There's so much there anyway in each scene. And I think this also has to do with the change in audience and how we perceive time. I think as things have sped up over time, our sense of of time changes, especially when watching movies. Although I do think I did see some of the criticism said it was too long, even back then. So valid concerns may still be had all around on that point. I'm not objecting to 2.5-hour movies. There are some that do it really well. One of my favorite movies of all time, Schindler's List, is obviously a very long movie, but I don't feel the time kind of like I feel it during this movie.
Yeah, I understand that. Probably the only other issue, and I don't know if this was just, they probably couldn't recreate the original score for it, but smooth jazz is all the way through the film. I mean, it's the same track. It never changes at all.
It's the same track, and when that runs out, it plays again. And for me, it's a bit of a distraction. There's no getting around that. And there may be, hopefully there's other versions out there, even though this is the longest one. There may be others out there that have a better score attached to it. And I know that a lot of silent films would have live orchestras or live bands playing in the theater, which I think is really neat, but I don't think this is that case in this movie.
Yeah.
It just repeats and repeats and repeats. Sometimes it just kind of fades into the background, and it's okay. And other times it's blatantly contradictory to the mood they're trying to set up.
Yeah, of course. It's like, because I want to say it's upbeat, but it is as much upbeat as it can be. And you've got some scenes that are, that are meant to kind of scare you or meant to make you feel things beyond, like happiness or
yes.
sadness or things like that, they're really supposed to move you. Yeah. And it's just the smooth jazz is playing.
Yeah, I know. You've got this machine that's also representative of the ancient biblical false god Moloch, and you see the workers being sacrificed into this open maw of a machine.
Yeah.
And it's like, do, 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 do. It's like, come on. I know, I'd like to get into it, but you're really making it hard for me.
I really wish, now, for those of you that don't know, there was supposed to be a remake of sorts. I don't know if it was going to be a series. I don't know if it was going to be a movie. I want to say it was going to be a series. I'm not looking at it right now, so that's why I'm telling you it could have been a series or a movie, but it was supposed to be on Apple TV. And when the writer strikes happened, it wound up being canned, mostly because, they just couldn't work on it and it was getting too expensive, which in all honesty, I can understand. Like, that movie for the time looks expensive. And I can imagine like the scale of which they would probably try to remake it would definitely make it even more expensive. I'm hoping that maybe it gets picked back up eventually some capacity. I think because it's a neat story.
It is. And I think actually you could adapt another version of this to reflect, because some of the themes are timeless in this. It has to do a lot with man's advancement in technology and how we're and how we become dependent on the changes, but also those things, are vulnerable to our own faults, come through our technology in ever more pronounced ways. In fact, technology is often an amplifier, I would say, of kind of our virtue, whether for having it or lack thereof. And so you could just take the same plot and apply it to revolutionary changes that came well after the Industrial Revolution, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree totally. Let's talk about the art for a bit. The special effects and the art, I think, in this film are one of those things I could see myself actually rewatching it for, although in smaller doses. I love art-deco, a design popular in the 20s and 30s. It also combines that with Bauhaus. Also, there's some elements of Gothic in terms of the cathedral. You have a cathedral scene in here. You've got the inventor's workshop, which is very Gothic. All of that, it comes together, and it doesn't feel jarring when it goes from one to the other. It feels totally appropriate.
Yeah. I agree with that. Art's not my biggest forte, but yeah, I will say from that point of view, I really did like the set pieces in this movie, because even though it is it's a large cast and everything, it made you feel, because of how they set it all up, what they showed you in terms of the world, how big this place truly is.
Oh, yeah.
I've always thought of like Gothic style elements and things as, big, beautiful, and yet something very sinister, very terrifying about it at the same time. we're going to talk about the cast here in a little bit, but I got to give it to Bridget Helm. And I say that because she plays two different roles, but she does a fantastic job because it's a silent film, but she does a fantastic job of moving her body as both the characters that she plays that really like portrays like the softness of one character and the evilness of the other character.
Yes, and she makes a very distinct acting change for the two roles. One of the technological aspects of the film, there was a new kind of plastic wood that was just being developed, I think, at the time. And they decided to use that to create the mechanical parts for her to act in. Although I read that it got her scraped and cut up a lot, too. So there's a lot of physical pain in that performance, I think, too. At least in the part she's in the robot
like
suit.
It.
Yeah. She said she could barely move. And but that was one of the other technological developments. But she does a really good job, like you said, when she's playing, I guess I want to call her Hell. The inventor wanted or was interested in having a relationship with this woman, but she went off with the industrialist and died giving birth to his son instead. So he's still carrying a grudge over that.
I wish that was more of a point, like in the movie, in the story. I know what they were doing, like with it, like how they were setting that up for later parts of that part of the movie. But like, if we got more scenes with maybe both of them grappling with her death, that would have been really neat.
Yeah, I think for me too, it kind of feels like an unresolved thread that they pushed fairly enough that you want to see that resolution to it, but you don't get that. The story moves on to the bigger plot, and I think that a trimmed down movie would have plenty of room to develop that more too.
You said something earlier about Machine Man. So Machine Man is actually like, I don't know, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. Maschinenmensch. It's a human. In fact, if you look on the wiki, it says literally machine human in German. The reason why I kind of already knew that was because of the idea of Superman is a word that was Supermensch, and that was which means superhuman. And that is a term pretty much coined by philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah, it is interesting, actually, because the Übermensch was big in Nazi ideology as well. Obviously, the German is the perfect man. Yes, he doesn't put it over yourselves, but then to take Superman, who was created by two Jewish writers and artists, as a kind of almost like the antidote to Nazism. Here's an actual Superman. By virtue of not just his strength and ability, but by his virtue, right? By his character. And so I thought that's a neat little side thing too. Speaking of Nazis, apparently Fritz Lang was approached by some very high ups, maybe even, I don't know if it was Hitler himself or Goebbels, but they wanted him to make Nazi propaganda films for him, and he just kind of at that point, it's like, I'm going to America now. So he fled the country. And I'd have done it too, man. It's like, if I had the means to get out of there, I would have done that too. And later on, I do think it kind of colored his perception of his own film. It's like, what did they see in this film that I made that these people liked? Because these are Nazis. He doesn't put it like that. He kind of says the story's naive. It's a bit too fairy tale-ish. And I get that too. I can see the element of it. There was criticism for that during its day too. But I do think there's merit in the film that I think he was perhaps a little too down on himself for it. But that's just my impression. I think the film has had its influence visually over the years, I think. In more modern terms, for films that are outside of the scope of this podcast, anything after 1975 or so, films like Blade Runner and films like even Star Wars had its art deco, and especially C-3PO. If you can't see, the Machine Man and C-3PO as kind of like machine-like relatives, then I don't know what's for you, man.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with that.
I think I kind of understand why Hitler and his group kind of liked the film, because I think someone like Hitler would have seen the movie and he sees kind of himself in the place of Freder. He's the bridge, right? He's the one who brings German industry and the worker together. And that's kind of what the propaganda was trying to sell anyway, right? Although you can't put the delusions of a madman, I wouldn't give his delusions any weight to their judgment of art outside of his own mind, because that's not a place you go anyway.
Yeah. Someone horrifically horrible, took his piece of art that was about not abusing each other. Like, that's what it was about.
Oh, yeah.
It was about not hurting each other, not stepping on each other. And someone took that and took a people that were hurting. I mean, that's the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
That's one of the issues in Germany prior to Nazism is, you know, they got to that state. It's not just because of World War I, but they got to the state because they couldn't get along like they should get along. And, you know, someone took that, they warped it, they used it to abuse.
This is where I always like to say, try and see if the character lines up, because the character of Freder in the movie, okay, he's actually displays a lot of virtues, and he has empathy right off the bat, and he runs away from his, you know, rich boy lifestyle, right? That he was sheltered from all this other stuff, and he goes to help them. That's a really virtuous thing to do. But if you're someone like a dictator, it's like, you want the attention he's getting. You want to be the one who gets the attention for that kind of joining of these two great powers of the worker and the industrial class. But you have none of the virtue. You know, you have none of that virtue.
Yeah.
And if you don't compare the virtue of them, then you're going to be vulnerable to believing something like that. So there's a lot more you could talk about. I mean, it's a very fascinating film. I think the criticisms I have for it all come down to pretty much just the length of it. And that's mostly it, really. It's just the length of it. It could be trimmed by a really good deal and maybe some reshifting of the priorities. But overall, I'd say, look, you can watch this movie, and if you get to a slow part, just skip forward about 30 seconds. That's what those buttons at the bottom of Tubi are for, right? You know?
Yeah. There is one thing about this movie. Like I said, there were some scenes that kind of creeped me out. But when she's doing that, like, you know, dance in that scantily clad dress, it was just so creepy. It was, and maybe this is where the music actually worked, because again, like on Tubi, it's just, you know, it's smooth jazz all the way through. And you're watching this super unsettling dance backdrop to like
smooth jazz.
And you're just kind of like, this is kind of creepy.
Yeah. The importance of music to have an effect. It's hard to say how that affects the original vision of the artist had for that. Oh man. But I know what you're talking about. I think for me, what made that creepy, even creepier still actually, was the reaction the male audience was having. You know, and then she's looking at you. It's almost like the director is implicating the audience, because when you look at Hell in that dance, she's looking at you, you know, and then you turn around and you see the reaction of the audience is like, am I them? Is this what the director's saying about me? You know,
Probably.
Yeah. So any final thoughts, Ryan? First of all, who would you recommend this film to? I mean, I think it's recommendable for sure, but with caveats maybe.
If you like sci-fi, I think it's probably, I don't want to say it's like a must watch, but if you like sci-fi, you know, this is a movie that kicks off sci-fi. I mean, well, I don't want to say kicks it off, but this is a movie that really pushes sci-fi forward, you know, because look, it's a silent film, and it's a sci-fi silent film.
Yeah.
You're getting a futuristic world with many futuristic concepts. You know, this is 1927. Like, I know the idea of computers was somewhere around, like, but you have like actual like ideas for computers in this movie.
Yeah.
You know, you have a robot, and it's not like, you know, it is somewhat Frankensteinish, but at the same time it's its own creation. It's a vast world. Like, and by vast world I mean like it's a huge city. The movie lets you know, again, for something that was in 1927, that's when it came out, for something that, you know, we did not have necessarily technology for, it does a really good job of like trying to show you what this world is like. You can see the influences in things like Blade Runner and things like Star Wars. So if you like sci-fi, then I recommend it to you. I will say this too, to those that are listening. If you did not know this, there is actually a book, and the book was written first, and it was written specifically as a treatment for the script. So it should be, I have not read it. I actually think I might sit down and eventually do that, but it is written as a pre-treatment for the script anyways. And so, you know, I'm sure that tells the story in its own way. So for book lovers out there, go ahead and do that. But I think it's for anyone that likes sci-fi, definitely anyone that likes old movies. If you just want to see history, I think history buffs would like this movie because, again, if you're looking at this from a world, you're looking at this from a almost pre-Nazi world, meaning that when this movie was filmed and released, Nazism wasn't fully intact yet. I would say you got probably the rise of it. Yeah, it's sitting in between both world wars, and that's always a fascinating time, in my opinion.
It is a very fascinating time.
Period, not a fascinating time like as this is fun, but fascinating time period.
I love it when history and film comes together in unexpected ways, and this is one of those times. And just like last week we saw with the Lavender Hill mob, it's like you saw some of the effects of the bombs of World War II on London, and here it is. Before the power centers come together in Nazi Germany to create that situation. So yeah, it's I think if you're into sci-fi, definitely as a historical thing, and like I said, if you get a little bored with parts, just skip through bits and pieces. If you're not really terribly into sci-fi, maybe this isn't the film for you. It's got some allegorical value, but and so with that in mind, take that information as you will, folks. As always, we encourage you guys to watch the movies with us and comment in the comment section. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts too. Next week's film is Lured, starring Lucille Ball, George Sanders, Charles Coburn, and Boris Karloff. So with that in mind, Ryan, any last words?
I wish I had a quote from this movie to give you final words, but it was in silence. So I'm going to do exactly that, and I'm just going to sit in silence.
Okay, because there's another alternative. You could always sing that smooth jazz if you can sing the smooth jazz bit.
Do 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 do
do do do do do do do. I can't. If I start singing it now, it's never going to leave me. It already isn't, probably. But all right, guys. Until next week, we'll see you later. Bye bye.
Bye bye.